The case for open borders. Open borders means allowing unlimited immigration, in particular to Western nations like the USA, the UK, Western Europe, and Canada. As a Canadian, I speak primarily of the Canadian perspective, but the argument holds for most developed nations. That being said, Canada is perhaps uniquely suited to benefit from immigration because of our large landmass, highly developed economy, and small population. Open borders would be of tremendous benefit. The most obvious advantage is that individuals in poorer countries would be able to work in richer countries. So instead of earning 50 cents or $1 an hour in the Philippines or Brazil or Colombia or South Africa, they would be able to make $10 plus an hour in the West. Many of these people might send money back home to their poor families, providing needed aid to help lift hundreds of millions of poor people out of dire poverty. But people in Western nations would also benefit from this influx of newcomers. How would Westerners benefit? Well, one example is childcare. At the moment in Canada and probably a lot of other Western nations, there's a huge demand for childcare, with daycare spots running at $40 a day and up. A lot of families are working two jobs, they're earning good incomes, but as a result, they have serious childcare needs that aren't being met. Well, there are hundreds of millions of impoverished women around the world who have excellent caregiving experience who are willing to provide this service at a reasonable rate. Another benefit would be the influx of unskilled labor. In Western nations, or at least in Canada, there aren't that many people who are interested in being a farmhand or janitor or dishwasher or doing otherwise unskilled work. There are some, for sure, but not really as many as the economy needs. On the other hand, workers in poor countries would love to do any work at even a modest wage by Western standards, since the hourly wage in the West is so much higher. So higher immigration levels could create a lot of businesses or jobs that might not otherwise exist. One way to handle the influx of foreign workers might be through the proliferation of domestic servants. In exchange for room, board, and a modest wage, families could hire immigrants to take care of some of the menial labor that would be the traditional provenance of the stay-at-home mother in a single-income household. Even households comprised of roommates could benefit from having servants as well. The immigrants would stand to benefit greatly, since they would now have access to the lucrative Western job market, and the natives would benefit and they get a maid for just a few $100 a month. A lot of Western nations, like Canada and Japan, have or will have aging populations. So another way that immigrants from poor countries can be accommodated is as living caretakers for the elderly. A lot of old people need help around the house with cooking, cleaning, yard work, getting to appointments, and whatnot. This would allow elderly people to enjoy a better quality of life in their golden years by allowing them to stay in their homes for a longer period of time, while simultaneously providing housing for immigrants. Plus, a lot of old people are lonely, so they'd have some company. A lot of older people have extra space in their home anyway, and it doesn't cost much to feed a Brazilian or Filipino immigrant who's used to eating rice with just a little bit of meat and vegetables. We're talking like $100 a month in marginal grocery costs. This would also help with the issue of overcrowding in nursing homes. Especially, that's going to be a problem with the coming demographic shift that Canada and some other Western nations will be facing with a much higher percentage of old people. Some critics argue that a massive influx of foreigners would lead to depressed wages, in particular for low-skilled work. This isn't really true. There might be some modest adjustment period where low-skilled wages drop at first, but workers constitute both supply and demand, as they are both workers but also consumers. And though a foreign immigrant might start off with a low-skilled job, as they learn the language and perhaps take night school or get certified, learn skills on the job, they're going to transition away from unskilled labor into skilled labor or entrepreneurship. And well, again, This might put some initial pressure on housing. Increased demand is going to trigger increased supply. So in the long run, that too will even out. A lot of immigrants are content to live in more crowded conditions than old stock first worlders. So the marginal per person demand for housing would be less with immigrants from poor countries than with increased native population, say from higher birth rates. Meanwhile, a lot of these foreign workers would be perfect for the housing construction industry because they've got experience or an appetite for the manual labor involved with building houses. Others argue that immigrants will vote for more government. Well, so what? It's not like the people born in the first world are overwhelmingly libertarian to begin with. And it's questionable about whether somebody that has experienced abject poverty and then gets access to a first world job market is going to adopt the belief in welfare statism that is so common amongst Native Canadians. Perhaps people in the third world have a tremendous work ethic. They have to, because the only way to get even a modicum of income in the third world is by working extremely hard. 60-hour plus weeks are routine in a lot of poorer countries. There is also a culture of entrepreneurship in a lot of poor countries that is sadly lacking in Canada, in no small part because of the ridiculous barriers to entry imposed on new businesses by the state. There are other things we could do to help facilitate open borders. Eliminating the welfare state and all the regulations on the economy would be a good start. In particular, eliminating the minimum wage would make it a lot easier to ensure that all immigrants would be able to find jobs immediately. We should get rid of the welfare state and privatize healthcare and education. And of course, enacting the rest of the libertarian program of eliminating government spending and control over the economy and taxes would be very helpful as well. But while these measures would greatly facilitate things, whether we do engage in a radical program of liberalizing the economy or not, we should open our borders to anyone who wants to come here.